the culmination of this grand story that we've all been a part of that started in the beautiful mind of George R. R. Martin. One of the things that Dan and I hoped to accomplish with this series was the sense of a story with a real beginning, middle, and an end. For that to work, the final season has to feel like it was where it all came together, or it all fell apart.
We kind of built out characters and storylines, and now everything is coming together.
Having tied all the knots, it's such a beautiful episode and wonderfully written and directed by the two men that created this madness themselves.
Often the best stories are the ones that are both completely surprising in the moment and then in hindsight have an air of inevitability.
In terms of the final episode, even just thinking about, where these characters end up, which of them survive, which of them die, that's something we've been talking about right from the get-go. And I think it was around season 3 when it all started to make sense to us exactly where it was going.
The end of an era, it's the end of a story. I think it was very important for them that they directed the last episode.
We've known that we wanted to direct the final episode since probably season 3 when we directed our first episode and really enjoyed the experience.
Our favorite part of working with them is that they listen to everybody and they listen to ideas. They might not always accept them, but their door is always open.
I just don't think they could give that episode to anyone else. I'm sure they've sort of been dreaming about the way the shots should look.
We've been working with these actors for so long now. We've been working with the great Jonathan Freeman, our DP, for so long, and our incredible editor, Katie. We just have a team around us that we really trust, and we have a real shorthand with them. And the final hour or so, we just wanted to be the ones doing it.
Dan and David are such great collaborators, and they're very clear at what they want, and they're very clear what they don't want. So the process working with them was not only a delight, but very easy.
We knew episode 6 couldn't just pick up visually where episode 5 left off. And I think from the very beginning, we knew that a very large part of episode 6 in the beginning especially was going to be not about what was being seen, but about the person who was seeing it and what it was doing to him as seen largely in shots that stay very close on Peter's face.
He starts this journey and he knows what he's going to find. And that's his brother and sister. And that's sort of what really leads him to cut ties with Daenerys, because it didn't have to happen.
He then goes back to the Red Keep, and then the final consummation, of course, is when he gets downstairs and he finds his brother and sister dead.
We ended up using these, I won't even call them dummies because they're so well done, that Lena and Nikolai came to set ready to lie down and be dead, but these dummies were so much better at being dead than they were.
Even though the intention had always been just to use the dummies for part of it and the actual actors for the rest of it, we ended up using the prosthetics the entire time.
I think it gave Peter something a bit more real because those dummies were dead. They were motionless. And if Nikolai is sitting there covered with soot, Peter's trying to get himself to a place that Tyrion would be. And then 3 seconds after he's done, Nikolai's coughing and laughing and blinking, and it would be the spell would get broken over and over again. We realized that having to reset every time was going to be working against the grain of what he needed to accomplish in that scene.
The storyline, episode 6, a lot of it takes place in places that are visually effects enhanced. So the director of photography, Jonathan Freeman, had to work hard at working out the best way to shoot things and then construct what minimal bits of set we could afford to make.
The Clouds of Speech scene was almost entirely a virtual set. What was interesting is that our production designer, Deb Riley, decided this year she would like to introduce a tool that we had not used before called VR. Virtual reality, but it's applied to filmmaking.
We had a concept that Kieran Belshaw had drawn and created, and Dan and David had signed off on. And so the next step was to try and work out exactly how big our build would need to be in order to replicate the kind of height and drama that Kieran had in that concept. Jonathan and I took it into virtual reality then, and to Jonathan's credit, he worked incredibly hard to try and figure out just how high that staircase needed to be, just how far his camera needed to be away in order to create those shots.
We greened one of the big stages, put the one section of stairs in, and they were able to shoot all of the coverage there, and secondarily in front of the exterior King's Landing gate for the Unsullied, the troops on the ground, and then Jon walking through.
A lot of that speech, we were trying to put a lot of movement in, and not sort of straight movement, circular movement. So we put up sort of a lot of circular rails up there, and also used a very small telescopic crane to be able to work on top of the steps, because it's tricky. There's a lot of VFX work around you there, trying to imagine what's in the background.
Dany has been above it all, literally, throughout this entire battle. She's fought the whole thing from the air. So when she's in the plaza, all she's seeing is her own armies triumphant in the city that she came to conquer for all the best reasons. And I think the idea of spreading her brand of revolution around the entire world is a very attractive idea to her at this moment. In her mind, it's a very ethical idea because she's not seeing the cost the way Jon and the way Tyrion have seen the cost.
I knew that speech was going to be really important, and I spent a huge amount of time learning it. And for the first time in my whole Game of Thrones career, I got that word perfect. I'm being so brutally honest here, I was in hell learning that speech. This pretend language was literally eating me up. I couldn't do it. And then magic happened. I woke up in the morning, went on, and it all came out. I was probably fighting, not what I was saying, but it was what Dany was doing.
What's interesting about it is that she's been making similar kinds of speeches for a long time, and we've always been rooting for her. And this is kind of the natural outcome of that philosophy and that willingness to go forth and conquer all your enemies. And it's just not quite as fun anymore.
In some ways, Cersei beats her, I think, in a strange way, because Cersei twists her into a bad person.
I think the final scene between Jon and Daenerys is something we came up with sometime in the midst of the third season of the show. The broad strokes of it, anyway. But there was a tremendous amount of pressure to get it right, because we know that this is not a scene that's giving people what they want.
We got there and was just kind of like, oh my God, this is gonna be so emotional. And then it was realizing that we actually had to do so much work to get all those shots that we needed.
At the beginning of the scene, Dany enters, and the wonderment of her coming into this space was reminiscent of the scene that we shot in season 2, the dream sequence. Dan and David wanted to echo that scene. There's a fine balance because we care about the two characters in the throne room, Dany and Jon, so it's hard to find a point of view. And in some ways, we didn't want to really force a point of view. So it was important that we allowed that each character had their moments.
Please, Dany.
Can't hide behind small mercies.
There's this discussion through the whole show of whether or not Daenerys is like her father, who was insane. Throughout the whole conversation they have, she really maintains like a reasonable approach to the thing that she's done. And there are only a few places where something peeks out that tells him what's really coming.
What about everyone else?
They don't get to choose.
He doesn't know he's going to betray her until right at the end. And at that point in Jon's head, it's a number of things. It's number one, you don't factor in anyone else's decision. And also, that means you're going to kill my sisters. So it becomes family versus her. And that's ultimately why Jon does what he does.
Didn't see it coming. Final scene, I did not see that coming. So it was brilliantly written because it reads the way that it hopefully will play, which is, what? After all of everything that she'd done in the season, I almost felt relieved.
To destroy the throne room was something that terrified me, actually, and it's something that we did quite early on. And I also was quite concerned about that because I didn't feel that I'd learned the lessons of the rubble and the destruction at that point. So it nearly killed me, and I was really still trying to work out exactly what it should look like as we were going. Because it's very difficult to concept and very difficult to predict just how much rubble you would need. Certainly the thing that I've learned is these sets are very, very hungry. No matter how much you put in there, you can always use more.
It's not easy to create rubble that looks good. It can quite easily look very still and fake, and the shapes we had to create in order to give it not just a visual interest, but also an impact, that was really difficult.
David and Dan had spoken about the images of Coventry Cathedral that had been bombed during the Blitz, and the beautiful image about that and the tragedy of that image is just that the facade is standing there. There's no roof left. It's absolutely heartbreaking, and I think that that's precisely what we were trying to do with the throne room, was to create a very moving space, a space that also felt quite poetic in a sense. It was something that Jonathan and I looked at in virtual reality very carefully. He was very clear about what areas needed to be real, what areas needed to remain of that set, and how much visual effects would have to take over.
Drogon shows up, but it's tricky that when he comes in, he doesn't steal the show. We had to animate him in such a way that he's always second fiddle to what the actors are doing until he does this huge roar and then blasts the throne.
The big question in people's minds seemed to be who was going to end up on the Iron Throne. One of the things we decided about the same time we decided what would happen in the scene is that the throne would not survive. That the thing that everybody wanted, the thing that caused everybody to be so horrible to everybody else over the course of the past 8 seasons was going to melt away. Then, of course, what it looked like became very important.
Gavin having built the original throne, it was very fitting that he also sculpt the melted version.
There had to be quite a big R&D session, really, to get the final thing, because this was a big piece of work, the climax to the whole season. So there was an enormous amount of pressure on us to make it look right. The closest thing we got was actually just finding burnt-out cars. The alloy wheels were actually sort of running, to get that kind of metallic look to it, but also its behavior. We built a model on a much smaller scale before we then went full size into the sculpture. Once it was sculpted, we then had to mold it all, which was a very difficult process, and then cast it all out. You then work very closely with the special effects department. They took one of our molds of the centerpiece of the throne, and they were having to sort of get lighting elements in there. And then obviously visual effects are kind of working all of the magical side of things, of actually seeing it melted in various stages.
We developed a whole bunch of shots, which is a combination of practical fire and then digital melting. For the throne room scene, we just threw the absolute cutting edge of technology at it. And when you do that, you free up the camera people to do what they do. They're even less constricted.
And there's a lot of new technology we were using, a system called ENG, which allows the operator and on the screen to see what is out there on the green screen. So it sort of marries the world you see with the imagined world, but you actually get to see it in the camera.
ENG was fantastic. It made the process a whole lot easier for everybody, for the actors, for the cameramen. You're watching the scene take place with Drogon right there.
We had to use wire work and the pole arm to pick her up. When Drogon picks her up and flies away,
We did that all on wires.
The dragon flying away with Dany's lifeless bodies, that's the climax of the show. What we didn't really realize was how much residual drama there was left. Once we realized that both Jon and Tyrion were inevitably going to be prisoners, we knew that their fate was far from settled. So we went through a number of different versions of how to best take advantage of that tension, and we finally landed on the version we had in the Dragon Pit. It's a rare opportunity on a show like this to get everyone, or at least large numbers of your main cast together in the same place. It was great to go back there.
We shot at Italica, which is a coliseum that we shot in last year. It's what they call the Dragon Pit, which is where the Targaryens used to keep their dragons thousands of years ago. And it just seemed to be a good focal point to have a central meeting.
They wanted it to be a little less power structured in the sense that they preferred almost a semicircle so that no one ever really had the head seat of the table, if you will.
Jonathan had some fantastic plans for, how we would shoot the day. A lot of the end result is that the audience will see it as though it was shot in the last knockings of the daylight. During the day, we'd shoot a lot of the actors and try and sort of shade them a little bit. But when you see anything wide, all those shots were done right at the last moment of the day, so it would look like an evening scene.
Jon committed his crime here. His fate is for our king to decide, or our queen.
We don't have a king or queen.
You're the most powerful people in Westeros. Choose one.
It's a momentous moment where we kind of decide who will be the ruler of the Seven Kingdoms and kind of where everyone will go.
I suppose you want the crown?
Me? Can't think of a worse choice.
Who then?
Around season 3, we went to visit George R.R. Martin, and he writes and he kind of figures things out as he's writing. When we went to visit him back then, and this was while he was still writing book 5, he didn't know yet where the story was going, and he knew a few key things, and one of those key things was that the final king at the end of the story would be Bran.
All hail Bran the Broken, first of his name, king of the Andals and the first men, lord of the 6 kingdoms, and protector of the realm.
All hail Bran the Broken!
I wasn't surprised by Bran. Bran is the only probably pure person in there. And the idea that he cannot father children is the real key for Tyrion's reason, because they have repeated the cycle in this Westerosian history of heirs being really bad.
When Tyrion does suggest that he should be king, there's no real surprise with Bran, and then there's a great line where he gets to go, "Why do you think I came all this way?" Which I don't even think is just a reference to coming all the way down to King's Landing. It's the fact that why do you think this character has had this journey, going from someone who has everything taken away from them, who has to go on this wild journey over many years. And now he finds himself all-knowing and king of the now 6 kingdoms.
Lord Tyrion, you will be my hand.
We knew that's where we wanted Tyrion to end up, back where he started in that chair to try to, I think as Bran says in the scene about, he's made lots and lots of mistakes for the past several years, and now he's going to spend the rest of his life fixing them. And we thought that it would be a really fun group of people to have him making those repairs with.
What I love about it is life goes on. There's not this end, and you sort of leave them to their business.
What's this?
A Song of Ice and Fire. Archmaester Ebro's history of the wars following the death of King Robert. I helped him with the title.
Dan and David had always had imagined a shot at the very end, tracking back over the destroyed King's Landing map. Cleaned up, but the destruction is there, so there's still work to be done, basically.
It's a very, very satisfying ending because it suggests there's going to be a way forward that is completely different. And again, hopefully, will be much better for all the people involved because their voices will be heard.
I think in a way it's a very cool victory for the Starks. Sansa gets to be Queen of the North, Bran runs the rest of the place, and Jon Snow gets to stay alive, which is a victory of sorts considering his predicament. And Arya is basically going off to explore the new lands west of Westeros.
We knew that those final minutes of the show is what people will walk away from the last episode of the show with. The fact that there was no dialogue to fall back on, that there was only the images of these people that we were going to see for the last time, we knew there's a lot of weight on those moments for us.
We started the show with these characters. I mean, we had the initial cold open where you were beyond the wall and you saw the Rangers and everything, but we basically started at Winterfell with the Starks. So we were always thinking back to those first shots. You know, we've been with that family for so long and we wanted to see what happened to them, really.
We wanted to thread the three storylines together, even though they're going their separate ways. So it felt natural to not only tell it as montage, but to actually design shots that would be similar, feeling even though they're going separate ways, they're still connected.
I can't really describe the moment that I read the final scene. I think it was just so overwhelming, and I kind of kept reading and rereading, and I felt a bit numb afterwards because I never thought I would be reading the final scene.
David and Dan wrote me in to dress it, which is great because it's a costume that I love. It's a lot of armor, a lot of embroidery and printing and dyeing, and it's quite special.
It's very gratifying. It's great that, you know, she ends up being Queen in the North, and I think it's the place where she really feels like she belongs, and I think it's a really just, happy, good ending for her, which I was never expecting on Thrones.
There was things that I wanted for her, and there's things that I didn't want for her. But overall, I think it makes sense. My whole arc this season was not about revenge, which is what my arc has always been about. In fact, it was the polar opposite, and actually deciding that that's not the life that she wants to live anymore.
I was incredibly honoured and proud to be how Thrones ends.
For the final sequence to end, David felt it was important to echo some of the imagery on the first episode of the first season. We used the frame that was set in the first episode and tried to recreate it somewhat with Jon and Tormund this time.
David and Dan were very intent on having the last shot mirror the first shot. It is a nice way to kind of echo the beginning while also reminding everyone of how much has changed. Instead of some Night's Watch people going out to investigate the wildlings or to harass more wildlings, it's Jon leading the wildlings out into their new home.
You're very aware of shooting the actual final shot of the show. Every inch of the frame you're so fixated on because you want it to all be completely right. So we spent a lot of time, and those people walked into and out of that forest all day.
When you do a take over and over again, everyone gets a bit bored and everyone's kind of going, have we got it yet? But with that shot, everyone wanted to just get it better and better each time. I'm pretty sure we all together watched one of our hero takes and said, well, that's it, that's the last shot of the show. And just looking at David and Dan's faces, kind of going, wow, this is it. They've done it.
Yes, that's the one.
It was a fun day because we had a lot of kids there. You know, the wildlings brought their children south of the wall. So in order to get all those kids, we had the crew members bring a lot of their little kids and get dressed up in costumes, including my kids and Dan's kids. And it felt appropriate for the last shots that it was such a family thing.
Saying goodbye to something that had become such a feature of your life and such a fixture in your life. And the people that we worked with and the people that we'd spent the time with kind of became a second family for us.
It's like an honest truth that our huge cast, they're all people that we genuinely love.
Oh, I know what I'm gonna miss the most. I'm gonna miss my colleagues. It's the people, it's always the people.
I'm gonna miss David and Dan being on set every day, who have become like older brothers to me. I'm gonna miss people like Sean Savage on camera, or like Sam Donaghy-Bell, who's a focus puller, like all of the people that, you know, people watching this won't know, but it's like, it's a family.
You know, it's been such a journey. It'll represent the most extraordinary 8 years of my career.
I'll miss the people, I'll miss the team. You know, there's a lot of banter, a lot of chat. Even when there's tough times, you know, there's a lot of humor, a sense of humor. Not just my own team, all the teams get on great.
It's very rare that you get to kind of, you know, hook up each sort of season with a group of people who, you know, you get on with and everyone's on the same wavelength, you know, when everyone has the same kind of goal. I think that's probably the biggest thing I'll miss.
I mean, I've learned everything from this show, and I've learned everything from the people who I've met on this show. I've just had the best time. I've had the best adolescence that anyone could ever ask for, and I have been allowed to grow as a person and as an actor, and for that I am truly, truly grateful.
I'll miss the camaraderie of everyone on set. I haven't experienced it before. I don't think I ever will again.
I'll miss everything. It's been the greatest. Not only with the quality of work, but the caliber of the people. I fell in love with this place, fell in love with these people, and in some respects, I think it's a little likewise, so that's a good thing too.
This was so nice to come to every year. I look forward to coming back here to Belfast and seeing my family again, my Game of Thrones family. And I mean that sincerely. I know that's something somebody usually says on one of these things, but it's really true in this case. It's our life more than our job.
What I realized the other day is that the show has given me more than just a job. It's literally given me a family. It's given me an identity that I didn't have. And I didn't ever think I would be able to play someone like this. And so she's been such a savior for me in so many ways. And I literally have David and Dan to thank for hiring me. I have the most hardworking crew. I keep saying it, but I mean it so much. They literally work harder than anyone. And the fans have, like, you know, they've given me a platform and given me hope. Thank you to all the people I don't know. Like, it's amazing.
Knowing that you're in a wonderful gig and knowing that it's coming back again, I'll miss.
I feel so honoured to have played this part of Brienne of Tarth. I've loved this character. I've loved everything that's unconventional about her. And I think the way that people have taken her to their hearts in a way that I've really felt from people has been so wonderful, because it's the idea of acceptance and it's the idea of people embracing difference. And that is very significant to me. I'm incredibly grateful for the support. Oh dear, oh no. It had to happen. I didn't want it to.
I think the fans of the show have been a great part of this as well.
Got to say thank you to the fans, because, you know, they've kept this going. They've made it as big as it is.
To David and Dan and the fans, I'd say thank you so much for trusting me with this character and giving me the best working experience I think I'll ever have in my life, and making every day feel like a collaboration.
I'm so grateful to have had Game of Thrones in my life. It's been, you know, such a whirlwind.
Game of Thrones has changed my life. What an extraordinary journey to be a part of, to be put into this landscape and to create what we've created is a real honour.
It's been a completely thrilling experience, not repeatable, and I don't really want to repeat it. I've just done it, and I'm happy to walk away and love it.
I hope everybody will find in their next project something they can bring from this experience. So for me, the hope is that I'm going to leave Belfast, I'm going to leave this show very proud of what we've accomplished, but very excited about what comes next.
It's been a real mixture of emotions this year. I think people are quite excited to go and do new things, and also to have been part of this beloved show is an amazing feeling. And also, you know, sadness because it's over.
I'm being very fortunate to end up here, and sometimes I don't really know how that happened. I'm just really grateful, particularly to Bernie, for giving me the job in the first place.
I think we're forever indebted to David and Dan for changing our lives and making them better and certainly more interesting than maybe a lot ever imagined. And I will forever be indebted to them. Amazing, outstanding, best crew that anybody could ever wish for working their hardest, for improving. You know, they did things that I don't think any of us imagined we could do. We all kept improving and stepping up to the plate and hitting home runs year after year after year. And I'll be forever grateful to each and every one of them.
It was a world that had a tremendous amount of love and humanity in it, and it was this group of people that was really, truly international, who came together from all over the world to one purpose, to one end.
It was the ride of a lifetime. You know, we just had so much fun over so many years and made so many good friends and got to tell the story, the likes of which I don't think we'll ever have a chance to do again. It's been my great honor.
Thank you and good night.
This is humanity's last stand against the death that has come for them.
The idea of doing anything that was 45-minute non-stop battle to me was terrifying, because battle fatigue. We couldn't just have a battle. We had to follow the characters through the story. Anyone will tell you that was the hardest episode of TV anyone in this show has done.
We had 11 weeks of night shooting. That was quite a feat for any crew to go through, because you literally become vampires.
I mean, we must have broken records in some way, even just broken, like, human working records.
I said to my guys, you know, you might not want to do it again, but you won't regret doing it the first time.
It's a real testament to the entire Belfast crew, who gave us something that no amount of money could ever buy.
We've been building towards this for so long now. You think back to the very beginning of the very first episode, and it's Beyond the Wall, where the White Walkers are stalking a group of Rangers. This is the culmination of one of the key storylines in the whole show.
We sat in the writer's room with a massive diagram of Winterfell. It was like a football locker room. We had a white marker, and we went through saying, foes here, foes move there, what defense would you have here? And we kind of just worked out the strategy.
We need to break up where we're shooting and what it looks like, so that we feel marked differences between the different locations, even though it's all essentially happening in Winterfell.
We've never been in anything but a pretty small fraction of Winterfell. We knew that, especially for episode 803, we were going to need a lot more Winterfell than we've ever had before, because the entire episode takes place in Winterfell, and you have 19 or 20 principal characters all involved in a very chaotic situation. Deb knew she needed to at least double the size of Winterfell.
We needed to create a different gate. We needed to feel like, as the script dictated, that Winterfell was surrounded.
The main consideration for Winterfell was just to make it much more visual, to fill the frame better.
This has been not the case with the entire series. It has grown from this kind of small event into this massive thing that is reflected in the story.
You can't expect the set to look the way it's necessarily described in the script. There's a certain amount you have to fill in with your imagination. They filled it all in for us.
In David Nutter's words, he was, in the early episodes, building Winterfell up so Miguel could knock it down. And the thing that was really important to us was working out how Winterfell would close itself down. What steps would the residents of Winterfell take in order to protect themselves against the army of the dead? One of the things that was hit upon quite early was dragonglass, and how would the residents use dragonglass in order to protect themselves.
The The living do have some time to prepare for this battle, and one of the things they know going into it is that they're going to be outnumbered, and another thing they know is that the whites don't like fire and dragonglass, so they're trying to use those weapons as best they can. It's lining the walls in the way that you might see a security wall topped with broken glass in our world. It's also in the courtyard in case the walls do get breached to try to prevent the whites from completely flooding.
They'd done all that they could with dragonglass, but nothing they would do would ever be enough.
We knew this episode was going to be almost entirely battle. That can get really boring really quickly if you're not careful. Part of what we cared about a lot here was getting Miguel on board.
I think that we went to Miguel because Miguel had had some of the most challenging battle sequences, and he had done them brilliantly. He was going to set himself the challenge of not repeating himself, a way of looking at the action sequences that would distinguish them from the other sequences and actually bring out something in the drama.
One of the ways we could keep this being interesting is not make it a battle per se. The way that you would normally imagine a battle. It usually has a beginning, a middle, and an ending. We know we need that, but what we also were trying to do was to give each act a genre.
It's kind of a cross between action set pieces and horror movie.
Fairly early on, I had a good idea of what I wanted it to be, because obviously the tricky thing with Act 3 is it's all at night time. And we kind of developed the idea of, you know, playing a lot in darkness, seeing less and hearing and feeling more than necessarily seeing it.
And this is just my own personal feeling. I didn't find the whites scary anymore. They're the monster, so in a way you need them to be scary, and we need them to not just be zombies, and we need them to feel like they're something other. From that emerged this idea, firstly, of what if we don't see them until they actually are right in front of us? The only way we could think to do that is I thought of the horror movie convention of if you're in a haunted house in the middle of nowhere and the only light that emanates from that field is that house itself and everything else drops into darkness, it makes what would by day be just another meadow or town or whatever it is, it gives it an ominous feeling. Having a steep drop off into darkness where we would not be able to see the scale of the army that was coming in to attack us emerged out of that. I think it's the first 20 minutes. You don't get to see the monster at all you do is hear them. And I think for me that was one of the most scary ideas, because what if it didn't work?
Shooting at night hides a multitude of sins in terms of a battle. It did expand. I think we never thought it was going to take quite as long, although during the prep period it became obvious that the episode was just getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
As soon as we did get that outline, I thought, this is not what we had imagined at all. Because it has whites and dragons, fire and night work, 11 weeks of it.
It was something that you didn't want to focus on too much, you know, you just treat it day by day, tick it off.
It's always more difficult for the crew than it is for the actors. It just speaks to the quality and the hard work that goes into this show.
That's the most amazing thing about our crew, is that David and Dan write it down and then we all try to figure it out.
The scene that I've seen it many, many times, but as we get more finished shots, it really gives me a tingle, is when the Dothraki and Jorah first charge into the darkness and the big trebuchets are firing.
From a set deck perspective, we were involved with the catapults and trebuchets with armory. So Tommy provided a couple of practical trebuchets, and then we had 3 or 4 made that were background ones.
The trebuchet is a very, very large centrifugal throwing arms. I like to build everything that is practical and we can actually get the projectile to fire. We went about maybe 30 meters, which is a good distance. Not in the historical reference, it'd be a waste of time. That wouldn't get you very far. But the fact that it still throw the projectile, it would still do all the action and everything could be done in camera. Once it left the trebuchet, then obviously visual effects would take over.
The more real stuff you can have in the frame, and the less you have to lean on your facilities or your visual effects houses to give you digital things or CG elements, CG flame, CG mist, CG smoke, the better off you are.
Over the 11-week period, that's a lot of smoke, a lot of changes in weather, a lot of equipment, a lot of crew to cover all of that. We had multiple wind machines, which we had to move every shot. We had multiple smoke machines, which we also had to move from every shot. every setup, along with snow as well. We had foam snow, we had paper snow, we had handheld snow guns, we had all sorts of things, just trying to surround every part of the action.
The fog of war sequence, the whole point is nobody knows where anybody is. Everyone underestimated how powerful, how brutal this attack was going to be. They lasted a fraction of the time they thought they were going to last. All of these are reasons for us to feel the chaos of that particular moment.
My goodness, it was overwhelming. You're on this huge set. It's filled with smoke. It feels like maybe 1,000 people on the set with extras, crew, and cast.
Death and horror coming from places you'd never imagined. Every time you think, oh, now there's a little break, and you realize, no, there's no break. It's just a crazy onslaught.
It all just starts to fall apart, and decisions have to start being made on the fly. And that's all mixed in with the stuff of, like, who am I doing this for? Who am I sacrificing my family for?
It was important to see how difficult that decision was for Grey Worm to make. As soon as he pulls the rope on that trench, he knows that every one of his men he's never going to see again.
He makes a choice, but it can tell that his heart is grieving as he does so.
To read the word trench on the page doesn't sound like anything, but it took such a lot of work to try and resolve it to a point that it was a convincing method of defence. Originally, it was planned at 50 feet outside the Winterfell main gate. I think it ended up more like 80 feet. And that was a big job between art department and special effects, so it was us and Sam's team.
The complicated process of the trenches began with the concept of it being a first line of defence. Therefore, it had to be, impressive, had to be very big because of hundreds of thousands of whites attacking. We can't have real logs in there because it's burning pretty much every night for 6 weeks. It has to be a steel thing, come up with a technique for igniting all these troughs, and so you have a nice wave of fire igniters.
We put 5 different cameras on it because we knew we were only going to be able to do this a couple of times just because of the nature of it. And we'd figured out where all those 5 different cameras would need to be. And the special effects team did a great job of sort of getting that thing to light up. We'd sync the camera move to exactly the speed of how it was going to light up, and it worked really well.
For a long time, Miguel always mentioned hell to me. This episode is just turning into hell for each character. A nice moment to introduce that would be when the trench goes up, which on the one hand for our antagonists is almost a saving moment because the trench eventually keeps the army of the dead away from them, but at the same time it actually turns image-wise into hell.
We wanted them to feel, at least in that moment, maybe this is all going to work out. Maybe things are all going to be okay. Those kinds of moments, those moments of hope, help emotionally shape the episode because it gives it somewhere to go when the hope is thwarted and things go the wrong way. And we thought that would help us with the episode as a whole, in addition to providing us with a visually memorable moment.
For the actual battle itself, Dany's impatient to get in there. She's like gunning for a fight. She's ready to take this guy down. She's a fierce warrior, although you don't really see a lot of hand-to-hand combat with her. And she knows how to fight to the death, especially at this point. There's a lot of anger. She's got all of that in her to put into this fight. So it's not just the matter at hand, but I think because of everything on an emotional level that's gone on, she's able to go into her cold-blooded side.
The Night King has exhibited various powers over this series, and one of the things that we know the dead bring with them is the weather, and part of it is just battle tactics. The 2 dragons are probably our hero's best chance of winning this fight. So it's very much a conscious choice by the Night King to neuter his opponent's greatest weapon.
Dragon fighting was one of the most exciting things that we had on the table, and it was also one of the most difficult things that we had on the table. It was a definite group effort.
When you're creating something that hasn't been seen before, like 3 dragons having a fight in midair, it takes a lot of imagination. It takes looking at whatever reference you can possibly call up. What do birds of prey look like when they're going at it against one another?
It's sort of an aerial dragon dogfight So originally the whole thing was just in this storm, and then, you know, we came up with the idea of let's get them up out of the storm, above the clouds.
The VFX boys, first of all, are brilliant. That buck is amazing. First time you go on it, you're like, this is awesome. Very hard to stay concentrated because you go in, you do like 10 minutes of a move, and then you go back to your trailer for like 45 minutes. And that's not, that sounds like an ideal day, but it's not actually what you want to be doing. You want, in some ways, as an actor, to be like the cold face, just sort of staying there, staying in the moment. Otherwise, your energy goes. So I found it really tough.
Whenever we have a shot where the dragons need to breathe fire, we want to simulate as best as possible the light effect from that fire and how it interacts with the characters and the actors in that scene and the environment. Where the dragon fire is going is moving, so we're trying to create the effect of the light moving from one place to another. That just really helps sell the believability of all that dragon fire.
We had the big flamethrower on the spider cam on stage that was shooting 40 feet of fire as fast as we could do it. We had a robot arm that moves as fast as you want. So for Assyrian, when he's blasting John, he's so damaged by this point, so he's leaking fire. We actually did laser cuts from the digital model of those openings, and then bronze casts were made and then fitted with fire jets, so that the fire would interact with those surfaces properly, and then that was put onto this robot with a quick arm, and then the camera was also on a motion control rig too. And then we had a fire rig on the techno crane on the stage in our element shooting, and we had, it was either 6 or 8 weeks of solid element shooting.
One of the most challenging shots in episode 3 is when the direction of battle is switching and Jon Snow goes back to the castle, and Miguel saw it as a one-er. We actually shot it in a series of shots which will be cut together in the end, but one of the biggest ones was when we travel through the courtyard extensively.
Kid's very aware of the camera, and he's very good at finding his marks and finding different positions that are required.
I had to always keep track of where I was in the fight, who I was following, what I was doing. It felt much more complicated than the battles.
We needed John to make his way through a courtyard and bear witness to all of the characters that we know and we care about, that he knows and he cares about, dying, essentially being overwhelmed, and for him to have to stay on track, to know that the reason he's there is to get the Night King and that humanity depends on that choice.
It wasn't so much about showing any single storyline as it was getting the sense of them all mixed into this chaos together and thinking that the chaos was gonna wash over them and consume them.
It's physically challenging, it's physically demanding. I mean, we were shooting a scene that, I mean, I probably never looked cooler in my entire life. I was stood upon a pile of bodies, fending off whites.
And the funny thing was that we said to the stunt guys, and there were like about 15 of them attacking me at the same time, and they said, if you manage to get me down, take me down. I had to fight for real. And it was extremely intense and extremely exhausting. I saw some of the footage and I think it looks real, because it is real.
The prop team have been very, very busy. I don't think they'll want to see another mound of dead bodies for a very long time.
Rob Cameron and Gavin Jones came up with the idea of moulding these bodies into these discs. So, you know, the on-set crew would be able to pick the discs up, move them around, and each disc would have maybe 5 bodies sort of moulded onto it. That was a piece of genius, really, and allowed us to get through the season with much greater efficiency, a much less painful sort of process in order to build up the feeling of the war dead in a way that we hadn't been able to achieve before.
Another challenge is that we not only build these massive sets, but nothing stayed the same. Every night the team would meet, and tomorrow this is what has to happen. You know, what has to be snowed, what has to be cleared, what dead bodies do we have, which dead bodies do we have, are they fresh dead?
We knew that in the episode that at some point the Night King was going to resurrect the dead. But in doing so, there's obviously all the cadavers and bodies which are in these tombs in the crypt, which would rise as well at the same time.
Nobody thought of that. He's bringing all the dead people back to life,
and they put the women and children in a crypt with all the dead people.
For us, that was exciting because it was going to be a brand new challenge. We referenced ancient mummies, we looked at corpses and skeletal figures.
It was scary because all the stunt guys that play the dead guys are in full brilliant makeup and they're around dark corners. You don't fully know where they're all coming from.
Shooting in the crypt was a lot of fun, actually. It was the first for me seeing White Walkers. The whole action was really fun because I never get to do any action. We were running around, Tyrion and I. We felt like action stars, even though we probably ran like 5 meters.
That's not a set. That place really exists. It's terrifying down there. So it's kind of great. You have all this epic battle going on upstairs, and then this genuine, like, horror movie down below.
It was one of the scariest days of my life.
Winterfell is kind of the home for the show, and one of the things that always struck us as a horrific aspect of this is that these hallways and rooms where we spend a lot of good times with characters that we care about has now become a horror set because it's been invaded by undead. We couldn't imagine a better protagonist for that horror sequence than Arya. Partly because we care about her so much, partly because she's the one in the midst of it.
We pick her up after being hit and taking the fall and running off. She's in a really bad way and in a lot of pain. And I guess what I was trying to play was like trying to play the drive to keep on and keep pushing on and keep going, but also this insane fear of like, what have I got myself into? What am I doing?
So the library in Winterfell was something that I was very excited about designing.
That was heavily influenced by the director Miguel Sapochnik, who wanted to have a, two-tiered room where the whites could look down.
He really wanted to be creating almost like a horror movie in there as well, to be able to build the suspense, to be able to go inside from shadow to light, and to be able to pace her around that room.
I took Maisie in there, and we were going to have 9 whites or something in there, and I gave them all a path, and then I told her she had to make her way through it without being seen. And we figured out this whole choreographed piece where everything was a near miss.
Usually every time that I've been running as Arya, I've been very focused and like head down, like running as fast as I can. And for this one, it was more of a like desperate scramble through the corridors and not being able to think clearly enough to make a plan until she's saved by Beric.
As soon as we first saw Beric in the 3rd season, we started talking to each other about like, well, why this guy? And it was always important for us that Beric have a reason and that reason be fulfilled before he dies.
When Beric tries to let Arya get away, he's trying to hold himself up, but he's also trying to stop the whites getting to her. And when I saw that, I really had a lump in my throat. I was just kind of proud of the character for being so brave.
Realizing that they are sacrificing themselves for her and realizing that she is here for a reason, and Beric clearly knows that. It's not until she sees Melisandre and business mode comes back again, and she realizes that this is what she has to do and this is what she was meant to do.
What do we say to the god of death?
Not today.
One of the great things about having this many people you care about in an episode and in a sequence together is that sleight of hand becomes a little bit easier, I hope, where you can pull people's attention and focus to people that they care about a lot, like Jon and like Dany, Theon and Bran, not to mention Tyrion and Sansa in the crypt. So hopefully you have so many places that your attention's pulled, you forget about the fact that Arya Stark ran out of that castle with the battle drums playing.
As was discussed in episode 2, the battle plan is to lure the Night King out, and so that means that Bran is the bait, and he's in the very center of Winterfell and the Godswood. The reason the Godswood was chosen is because it's such an iconic location, but it's also the weirwood tree has long been a source of power for Bran in particular.
Just when you think that it's all over, and just when you think that Jon Snow's gonna be the hero again, Arya appears through the mist. Shooting that was tedious. but so great to be able to perform all these different beats within maybe like 2 seconds of footage.
She does jump out of nowhere, and that's a wire rig. It's a wire rig we did on the location, but the location wasn't ideal. It was really hard to get a crane in there, and we've obviously got the weirwood tree, which is basically condemned. You know, it's all held together with wires. So it was tricky to do it there, and we did a version of it there, but then we had to redo it because it didn't have the ability to control it as much as we'd hoped, and it needed to be a real boom out of nowhere moment.
We did a lot of just testing, her flying through the air, making it look exactly how they wanted it to in the shot. And so my role in that was doing just all the testing for it. And then by the time we got that dialed in, we brought Maisie in to do a few jumps, and once she felt comfortable, she was in costume and did that on the day.
Maisie does almost all this stuff on her own. She has an excellent stunt woman for the dangerous stuff, but most of it's actually Maisie. And, you know, learning how to do these various tricks with the knife and learning how to flip the knife from one hand to the other. Once we saw how well she could do it in that moment with Brienne, we thought this is the way it's going to end against the Night King.
I'm really proud of myself. I'm proud of everyone. I'm proud of the work that was put in. And I'm grateful that it was me and not Kit.
I was pissed that it wasn't me killing the Night King. I would have given you like, I'd have bet you thousands.
I think it's probably 3 years now or something we've known that it was going to be Arya who delivers that fatal blow to the exact spot where the Child of the Forest put the Dragonglass blade to create the Night King, and he is uncreated by the Valyrian steel.
That's such a nice little full circle thing as well, that's the knife that was destined to kill Bran, and here it is saving him.
He's the king on the chessboard, and when the king is toppled, the game is over. It doesn't matter how many pieces you have left. And so we wanted to show that, and we wanted to see where each of our characters were in these moments. So it's kind of radiating outwards from the Godswood.
At the end of that whole fight, there's this moment, and then they all drop. They call it de-animation. They just de-animated. That was so impressive because usually when you see this in a movie, most of it is CGI. But here, so much it's been camera, it's real.
I'd be excited enough just watching that happen on screen and thinking, wow, what a great ending, but actually getting to be there and react to that as Bran is pretty special.
At the end of it, it's a victory for the living, but at great cost because some of our favorite characters fall.
Jorah's entire life has been building up to this moment. His ultimate redemption is to give his life for the woman he loves and the woman he betrayed. And we knew that that scene in his hands would be fantastic.
All he ever wanted to do was to fight to protect her. And if he could have chosen a way to die, this is how he would have chosen to die.
My favorite scene to shoot was my demise. When I read it, I just thought, yeah, of course, of course.
Holding him for the first time, she finally sees what she has closed her eyes to this whole time, and it's too late. You gotta go to your own depths to bring out that.
It's really hard to fake that kind of pure grief like that, and Amelia just really brought it in those moments. I think part of it was because she and Ian have been working together for so long, and it's all coming to an end.
We've been with these characters for so many years. We've been like to hell and back with them. It gets to a point where like it sounds crazy, but it's not a huge amount of acting.
There are a few moments in the final season where characters are saying things to each other that we don't hear, and that's very much by design. And I think Dan and I both had ideas of what he's trying to say, but we're never gonna hear those words.
We knew that episode 3 was pretty much an episode-long battle sequence, and we certainly felt exhausted by the time we were done, but that is sort of the idea of the entire episode, that you're in it with these people and you're in an impossible situation with these people, and by the end you should feel some small fraction of the exhaustion that they feel after having endured this experience.
By the end, for Grey Worm, and I think for a lot of the characters, it's just exhaustion on a different level.
I loved every second of that.
the torture and the brutality and the horror that you see in our faces is real.
It was hard and it was bloody, and I must say that I'm impressed that we made it happen.
Kudos to the crew. I don't think I've seen people work as hard as they have. Like, it's amazing the work they have done. I mean, it's a cliche, but it really couldn't have been done without them.
I've said it before, I will say it again. We have the hardest working crew in the industry, full stop.
At the helm of it, we have Miguel, who is extraordinary at shaping these incredible action sequences. Without him, that whole episode would have just crumbled. It never would have got done.
There were so many people involved in this, and there was so much thought that went into every single section. You know, it physically hurt to make that show. In television, this has probably never been done before, and it's probably never going to get done again.